All right, teammates, we are back once again. If this is your first time listening to the Move Swiftly podcast, welcome to the number one podcast on innovative teamwork. Great to have you. Looking forward to having you back for more. And thank you all so much for making this the number one podcast on innovative teamwork. It's been like that close to it, approaching 2 years of it being the first show that you see whenever you look up innovative teamwork. To my regular listeners, you guys already know how I get down. You know how we roll here, whatever the challenges, whatever the obstacle is, whatever it is you may be going through that you feel is getting in the way of your success. We're here to indirectly tell you are not going through it alone. Today, I have a Miss Rhonda Parker Taylor, author of The Crossroads. And well, before I actually really bring on the intro, I'll let you come on first to kind of introduce yourself before I really get into it. Because I teach, I'm a heavy reader, I'm someone that's really in the books. And when I was listening to you earlier, I'm like, man, I cannot wait to really pick your brain on a lot of different things. So welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. And I don't know if I can top your introduction there. My goodness, I guess I'm going to have to roll as fast as you and as swiftly as you and say we're going to talk about emotional intelligence, life balance, innovative teamwork, effective communication, entrepreneurial lessons, fast-paced business strategies,
Mhm.
leadership insights, and workplace collaboration. And how can we be a better version of ourselves? The only way can do that is emotional intelligence because it's the heartbeat of team success.
Listen, so here's the thing. So I didn't just wake up and get into the education world. I have a background in sports and fitness and stuff like that. And I actually wrote a book while I was still a trainer at a fitness facility. And then COVID happened, and that kind of made it so I had to pivot to the education industry. So when I first started teaching, there was a phrase, and the school I teach at is the Center for Creative Education, and we closely monitor the reading levels of the kids. We try to make it so we're giving them material for the kids that they like and stuff like that. So this was the first time I heard here at this school. I'm at this school now. The first time I heard the concept of realistic fiction was something that was actually new to me. And when I was listening to your story in terms of how you got into writing, you like me again, you were in the education world, you were doing some things in the authorship space, but then the question became, are you going to write fiction or are you going to write nonfiction? And you have a thing where you're able to write fiction, but it's realistic and there's certain life lessons that people are peeling back from your work. So I know that I just had to make sure I said that because when it comes to how you got started and kind of your background and your story, can you please take us a little bit through how you became a writer and then ultimately landed on kind of a unique concept where you're writing fiction, but it's very realistic, so it's relatable to students and people are really getting stuff out of your work.
Sure, I would love to. First of all, I think it starts with my background.
Yes.
I was one of the students that maybe you're teaching.
Yeah.
I flunked kindergarten. There was no IDP
Yes.
back in the
Oh my
days.
God. Yeah, we do that. Like seriously, so the school, because we closely monitor the scores, held several kids back at the elementary school age if they're not reading on grade level. This is why I didn't know that about you. And the fact that you're actually admitting that, transparent enough to admit that. And I gotta listen. Listeners, parents, if you have a kid that may be struggling, it's not the end of the road, man. That's beautiful that you said that. So thank you for sharing that.
Oh, you're welcome. And the thing is I nobody really knew. Okay,
Oh.
they said? Well, socially, she's not going to be able to keep up. She's not going to be able to do this. So
Hmm.
my peers moved on, which shaped a big part of my life too. Because now you have a split. You have a grade level above you that's like, why isn't she with us? So she flunked. And then you have a grade level that I'm in, and
Right.
they all are less mature than me. So
Yeah.
I took that caregiver role, that wanting to make them be better people and push them to be their better version. So all through school,
Hmm.
that was kind of my new role. And
Wow.
then I got my junior year, and I went to a private school, and we had to pass an English proficiency test.
Hmm.
And if you didn't graduate.
Hmm.
So I went to take the test. I had been going through some things, like life hit lessons, and I didn't pass.
Hmm.
And
Now,
so all of a
senior
sudden that
year in high
stress,
school? Was
yeah,
this senior year in high school?
you're going into senior. So
Okay.
I'm all worried about, am I even going to graduate? Am I going to be a failure? So that brought that negative self-talk in.
Hmm.
And I had a teacher. She was 98 pounds wet, probably been there 20 years already. She said, I will tutor you
Wow.
over the summer. So I got my Arby's job, and I was going to pay her with the Arby's check, and we sat on the floor in her house, and when it came time to pay, she said, just pass the test. She had learned about my struggles and my strife, and what many people don't understand is sometimes it's an intellectual growth issue, and
Right.
at times it's emotional growth issues. And
Right.
I didn't know the difference back then. And I don't think people ever diagnosed what was going on with me at the time.
Right.
But I ended up passing. So that mentorship
Hmm.
changed the whole trajectory of my life. So
Yeah.
I ended from this person that struggled, went off to college, which I would not have been able to do,
Right.
to getting A's in college. Then I'm like, well, what happened? What changed? And it gave me the confidence. I realized I had to put processes in place to be successful. My thing was, as I was rushing through and I was emotional about it.
Hmm.
And so I would want to get it done, put it out the door, and then it was over with. And so I didn't see the mistakes in it. I didn't stay in the moment long enough to really perfect what I could be one day.
Hmm.
And so I got my bachelor's, my master's, my doctorate, and then here I am today. But it had to be that one teacher, that one mentor, that one person that realized, wait a minute, she's struggling. Mine was emotional.
Right.
Mine was not necessarily intellectual. I would be, if I were going to describe myself, I'd say I was the like the dog that gets scared and piddles.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I would be scared of reading out loud
Right.
or exercises. I get so anxiety oriented that I just figured I was going to fail and I wouldn't try.
Wow. Well, first of all, we got to shout out to that teacher that took the initiative to help you out. And you're hitting on some major triggers for me because when you talk about emotional and trying to figure out how you fit in. That's my story all day. From the name as one Crookshank to having it be something that's mispronounced to from the teachers to my peers and all that. And that piece is something I don't know if I've ever actually heard broken down when it comes to really thinking about the emotions of a kid. Even me as a teacher, I try to stay very cognizant of what the young men and the young women are going through, seeing that it's a brand new school and seeing that they may be dealing with some home situations. So to kind of piggyback off that, I had a teacher in college who it was it a psycho no, not psychology, sociology. She taught a bunch of sociology classes, and I'd show up every single day. I'd tune in, I'd pay attention, but I'd always fail these multiple choice tests. I mean, every single time I'd fail. And she actually approached me and asked me if I wanted to do an essay-based exam. And I ended up, obviously graduating, getting my bachelor's and all that. And she told me the reason that she approached me with that because she saw me in class every day, paying attention, focusing, but I would fail the multiple choice test. So I bring that up because I'm curious now, when you look back on it, what do you think it was about you that made it so the teacher said, you know what, that Rhonda, there's something special about you. I'm not just going to let you fail. I'm not going to just let you not graduate from high school. As you look back on it, what do you think it was that made it so you were able to sort of stick out to her to make her want to help you?
I think it's very similar to your experience. I wasn't a rowdy kid. I wasn't a bad kid.
Right.
When it came to the rules, I'd walk up to the only as far as the line would be that that you were in trouble.
Hmm.
And a caring person. But what I lacked was the emotional intelligence to thrive. And until I read in my freshman and sophomore year of college, Daniel Goleman's books on emotional intelligence
Hmm.
and how emotional IQ or EQ is more important than IQ. I didn't realize that I had something in me that could still make me successful.
Hmm.
I think that it was that communication that she saw. She saw that I was trying.
Hmm.
There was not any malice towards anything. And I was willing to accept the results. And I think that that was a lot of it.
Yeah.
And I did have some emotional trauma that she had maybe she heard about it or maybe she hadn't heard about it.
Hmm.
and that was, um, something that she learned that from me. I know when we were in that space together, and she just navigated the days and made it, something special that I'll never forget.
So we have to really let's stay on this whole idea of this concept of emotional intelligence because
Mhm.
again, like you, I was a little later than you. I read my first book, like voluntarily read my first book after I graduated college. It was Lou Holtz, Winning Every Day, and it would absolutely changed my life, changed my world because I chose to read this book, and it wasn't some book that was just given to me from the school system. But you read, is it Daniel? Say the title again.
Daniel Goleman's Emotional Intelligence.
So when you read that and you obviously it hits you, it touches you a certain way. When it comes to emotional intelligence, can you just define it and kind of talk about what it's all about? And we
Sure.
can maybe educate some people on exactly what it means.
So we all know what an IQ is.
Hmm.
That's our left brain function, math, English, um,
The logic.
science, all the logic that we're supposed to have and that we're supposed to thrive in. And everybody says that's what's going to make you successful.
Yeah. Ooh, man. You hit some triggers, man. She is talking that. Like, you're talking my language. Because the people do that. Like adults actually, the parents actually do that. They'll feed you with that. They'll make you memorize certain tests, and all of a sudden, okay, you're gonna rule the world with it. You're gonna be so successful because you know those specific subjects.
Right. And what EQ is the right brain.
Mhm.
Nobody ever talks about the right brain. The right brain is your soft skills. It's your intrapersonal skills. It's your interpersonal skills. It's your stress management, your impulse control, and general mood.
Hmm.
And those actually, the EQ is something that you can build upon, where your IQ stays the same. You're born with it, and that's what it is, period.
Whoa.
So
Oh.
your EQ, though, you can teach yourself how to have higher emotional intelligence. And
Mhm.
emotional intelligence, what it really is defined, is the ability to monitor your own emotions and others' emotions before you act and solve the problem.
Mhm.
So you realize that there's motions, attentions, whatever may in a room, and you stop, you listen, and then you go through all of the categories. So let's talk about intrapersonal. That's the ability to be self-aware. You know your biases. You know what your experiences are. You know how assertive you should be or not be at different times. You have certain self-regard. You know not to just give up the ship in a negotiation.
Mhm.
There's also self-actualization. You know what your purpose is. If you have not done that for yourself, if you've not evaluated it and you don't know your vote values and your what's going on with you, you can't listen to somebody else's,
Mhm.
because first you're not going to know what your biases are towards what they're getting ready to say to you. So when you get in a room and there's a decision or some tension or something that's going on or a discussion or a team or a project, everybody, and they normally call it in the team aspect, storming. You get them all in the room and everybody's got to show who they are and show their power and all their skills, and they start storming and in the negotiation process. Well, storming happens because we're not self-aware enough
Mhm.
to stop and listen and evaluate our intentions and the intentions of everybody in the room.
Mhm.
And then once you do that, you have a social responsibility, which goes into the interpersonal skills, to listen, show empathy, be adaptable, which most people don't know how to do in the change process, then problem solve. And when you do that, what ends up happening is you get a synergy,
Mhm.
because you've gone from knowing who you are
Yep.
to how you are in the group. And then you go into the stress management. How are we going to manage the stress? If you're wanting a cookie cutter approach to everybody, boom, 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 you're making cookies this time of year. Everybody's a Santa Claus. There's all your your stars. Here's your Christmas tree. What
Right.
you're doing is you're limiting your team.
Yes.
And I'm sure you've seen that when you try to make in sports, everybody can't be a linebacker, everybody
Yeah.
can't be a forward, everybody can't be the point guard. There's some physical parts of that make people different, and
Yeah.
there's also certain skills.
Mhm.
A defense back obviously has the ability to hit hard, not be afraid of the hit,
Yeah.
and speed. But
Mhm.
on the other side of the
Receivers, yeah.
field,
Receivers don't make that. That's how they separate them, actually. I
yeah,
had a coach who, he coached the receivers, and there was one practice where we switched roles, and he was saying there was this particular safety that went to play receiver. He goes, "Yep. Well, I found out he couldn't play receiver."
yeah,
It was like because just
they don't want to take the hit.
they didn't want to. Well, it's either they didn't want to take the hit or they couldn't catch. But they're
Right,
just as athletic, just as the speed is there. But one person can catch and likes to give hits, the other person can catch and doesn't like taking hits and stuff like that. And
right.
it's the same way. And I'm glad the thing is, I'm glad you brought that up because the next question or next thing I want to make sure we're on the record saying, especially for you business owners that tune in, is what are some practical ways and some examples that you can share in which you start to see this create a more cohesive workplace, a workplace in which people are growing? Again, I'm saying cohesive and I'm not saying comfortable, folks. I'm not saying comfortable because you don't want comfort. You want cohesive, you want growth, you want people developing, you want people seeing, hey, I know you're going through something, you don't seem like yourself. How do we get better? How do we get better on the days where we're just our emotion isn't our mindset isn't in it?
Well, first, you have to know your team.
Come on now. Come
You
on. Come on.
don't
Come
you
on.
not know your team, you'll never know if there's a problem. There
Yeah.
are so many executives out there that says, "Oh, I'm going to get put a reward system, and I'm going to put a Ruth Chris steak dinner for the person that wins."
Incentivize them with money, incentivize them with steak dinners. Yeah, I mean, you're so
But
much
they're
of that is cookie. It's like the
they
cookie
don't
cutter
know.
thing. Yeah. Just
Yeah, they don't
like
know that they don't have the money for the tip. You can give them a gift card, but who's going to pay the tip? Who's going to get them there? Who's going to, what about the muffler that's falling off the back of their car or truck? So you have to know what people's needs are, what their desires are, how they're aligning themselves with your organization. Some people align themselves for the wrong motivation because they don't even know what their mission is in their position.
mm-hmm,
I happen to come from an entrepreneurial family,
mm-hmm.
and my dad was an old school dad, like many of us, and he
Well, as far as my life is, you're preaching to the choir with that one. I know exactly. I'm about to. Well, we're recording this 2 days before Thanksgiving, folks. So I'm flying out to Maryland tomorrow, and I'm going to be seeing when I texted him earlier. So yeah, I grew up with a very similar type father in what you described.
and he was a blue collar, owned a steel manufacturing
Yeah.
plant, and his way of rewarding people. Well, first of all, you wouldn't be having Thanksgiving until he said all the work was
Yeah,
done.
some
He
of them
would
work.
everybody,
Yeah.
no matter who you were. And
Oh yeah.
there's this piece of steel in the driveway because that's what they did back then. They had that Bobby Knight
Oh
kind of
yeah.
mentality. And so we
Oh
had
yeah,
to
yeah, yeah. Indiana, right, right. That's a basketball. Yeah, I know exactly. Yep. Hoosiers, the whole thing. Yep.
so we had to come up with for him a reward system that he could hit the hearts of his employees based on his personality also. So
Hmm.
as we were restructuring the reward system, he was known and his nickname was $100 Bill because
Really?
his name was Bill and he liked to reward with $100. So
Okay.
we created a fund that he could, that he had a certain amount that he could give out
Hmm.
when he felt like someone was working hard or he heard something because he had a practice. He'd come in, he'd grab all the mail, he'd look through everything to see what was coming in. He
Hmm.
didn't process it, that wasn't his job, but he looked through everything. He knew what checks were coming in. He knew what, invoices, what quotes, all the things coming in by just scanning through the mail. Then he would walk the plant and he'd stop and talk to each and every employee.
Yes.
And when he did that, he would find out, hey, my wife just had a baby, or hey, I just broke the record for piece rate, or whatever they may be. And
Mm.
he had with him then the ability to reward with $100 bill, which
Oh,
he could
Yeah.
where they needed it,
Yeah.
where they felt appreciated. And then, of course, he had the other part where he had to see where all the mistakes were, and
Hmm.
where they were going to be hidden was the trash bins in the back. So he would see the parts, the things that were thrown away, and
Hmm.
then he was able to say, or the quality that hadn't made it going into the trucks,
Hmm.
and he look at those and be able to address them every day. That was the same same way he did things. So as leaders, it doesn't take a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
It takes you knowing what's going on in your organization. I had one person that I tested for emotional intelligence for our UN Global Compact Committee study,
Hmm.
and that, which is part of the UN in general, but it's just the arm of sustainability.
Hmm.
And in that study, there was one man that took the emotional intelligence test that was a domestic leader just in the United States.
Hmm.
And he's like, I just don't understand why it's not thriving. And his number was as high as the multinational leaders. And
Hmm.
I'm like, well, let me dig into these numbers and really look at the characteristics. There were two characteristics that he was failing in. So he had high scores on all 21 characteristics, but two:
Hmm.
empathy and impulse control. So he had no empathy for anybody, for whatever they were going through. And
Right.
every time there was a happy event something was wrong, he was hiding behind his desk with the office door closed.
Yeah.
And then you see where that gets you. You
Exactly.
can't address the problems in the room.
Yes, and thank you so much for sharing that story. And I don't want it to get brushed over what your dad did because of if you look at it from a practical standpoint, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's say you are the employee that's having that conversation and you're telling your boss, you're like bemoaning or explaining to your boss, hey, I'm going through this. And then the money specifically is going to this specific need. The $100 is going to this specific need. That employee is going to trust you for life. That employee is no longer going to try to work around and do anything shady to try to do anything gimmicky so he or she can get some extra money out of you or get some extra bonus. They're genuinely going to care and tell you the truth at that point because of the approach you took versus the gimmicky approach versus the I'll give you a bonus to go to Disney World. I'll give you a gift card to go to Roots Steakhouse when again I don't you may not even want to go to that restaurant. That's somebody that you're pushing that person away when you do gimmicky stuff like that. But when you genuinely go walk up to someone and say, hey, how you doing? What are you working on? What are you going through in life right now? Boom. Then you've built the trust. And so often, especially nowadays, and this is where I really wanted to kind of really pick your brain on, is we've gotten away from that now. Social media, as great as it has been to allow someone like you and I to connect, it's also doing equal harm because people are separated and they're going to look where the grass may be greener and kids are growing up now. If they have a tough day at work, all of a sudden they're going on their LinkedIn accounts and their social accounts and they're blasting their boss and just doing things that you just don't need to be doing. And your book kind of speaks to that. Can you just speak a little bit on, the book Crossroads and how you were able to come up with it, and then eventually you created a guide, a work guide where people can actually follow and say, this is how you do things, and this is how you bring some of that compassion back to the workplace.
Oh, I would love to. So Crossroads, the suspense novel. You're probably thinking, how in the world does a suspense novel
I
have
said the same
anything
thing.
to
I said the exact
do
same thing. I'm like, oh man, it's gonna be interesting how she could twist
with
that.
emotional intelligence? But what I wanted to do is I really wanted to reflect on how we show up in the world. And where do we show up in the world? Typically in the most unusual places. So I picked a crime novel.
Hmm.
Everybody in a courtroom. You have the jury, you have the judge, the prosecution, the defense, the victim's family, the family of the perpetrators, and the defense, and you have them all in a room.
Hmm.
And they don't necessarily want to be there, but they're going to be their natural selves.
Hmm.
And so they're there for one mission, which is supposed to be equality of the legal system. And we know that it may be a legal system that we have, and it may be the best in the world, but it's definitely a flawed
Sure.
system.
Yeah, because
And
it's run by
thought,
human beings, so
yeah,
obviously it's right.
yeah. And I thought that that's was going to be the main like nuts and bolts of it. We're going to, get in there, and these people are going to be their authentic selves. And they and what ended up happening is, as I was writing it and got to know the characters, I started seeing the depths of them.
Mhm.
So you had the main character, Paris Pennington, who was a workaholic in finance that had to be brought into jury duty. And if you're a workaholic, that if you throw anything new into the works, it's very difficult to maintain the pace that you have for yourself.
I've been called to jury duty twice, and again, I know exactly that's me. That'd be me. As soon as I got it, I'm like, oh man, I got to do this.
And so she tries to get out of it. She
Mhm.
can't. And each one of the characters is loyal to something.
Yeah.
In Harris's case, it's her job and her excellence. In the case of the prosecutor, it's law, government,
Mhm.
and America,
Right.
and his job. And then you get into the defense, and it's creating a change in his career because he messed up a case, and now if he messes up again, it's going to be problems. But then he's getting ready to have his first family. And
Right.
then um, the sub um, perpetrator, which he has to decide whether he's going to turn state or not against a friend he's known all his life, because his loyalty was friendship. So you have all of these
Right.
loyalties, and sometimes false loyalties,
Mhm.
and they're all in a room together, questioning whether they've made the right decision. Did they not do the right thing? Should they be changing in their lives? But meanwhile, you're going through this crime, and
Mhm.
it's like a game of Clue, because then things start happening to the individuals,
Mhm.
and you have to decide who's doing it, what's causing it. And it explores three, I feel, important emotions in today's society, like you said, in social media:
Mhm.
anger, fury, and envy. All of them cause us to deteriorate
Mhm.
ourselves in some way or another, and can cause a crime.
Right.
And Proverbs says anger is cruel, fury is overwhelming, but who can stand before jealousy?
Mhm.
Envy makes the bones rot.
Right.
And if you're looking at yourself from these eyes of these individuals,
Mhm.
and you realize you're just not making the mark in your own life,
Mhm.
life is about continually changing and learning and navigating in today's business, home, life. Balance is supposed to be all of it. There's really 13 dimensions, not just two dimensions in our lives.
Right. So the point that you're making about envy, I think, is incredibly, incredibly powerful because when you are envious, a lot of times, not a lot, but most of the time, you're not expressing that. You're letting it fester inside of you. And
Mm-hmm.
that begins to lead to resentment and just drip by drip by drip by drip by drip. You start to see people's excuse me, you start to see people's true colors come out. And as you're discussing the characters, whether it's the one that's loyal to their job or loyal to their friends or loyal to a family, a new family member, and you're starting to see the crime, a lot of people now are starting to get away from they're starting to get away from any principles. They're starting to get, their businesses are being run in a way where they become more and more unethical as you go. So I'm bringing all this up because eventually, again, you had to figure out how you were going to communicate the principles of the book into a worksheet, like a guide for
Mm-hmm.
and for people that are trying to run their family. How were you able to make that transition? Because when I know about business owners and what I know about just if you go to people at this point, they have their degrees, they have their fancy education. They don't want to be reading nothing new. They want something that's going to make them their profits and then go move on. how were you able to kind of puncture the sort of the business community or the owners, the leadership executives who are so stuck in this world and that world is so lucrative for them and they gotten so comfortable in it, they're not realizing the damage that they're causing with some of the unethical practices that they have.
Well, first of all, I would ask anybody, whether it's a leader or an individual, are you working in all 13 dimensions of your own life? And if you're not, what are you missing? Example, you have your physical, your emotional, your integrity, your values, your spiritual connection, your relationships,
Mm,
your health. You go through all these dimensions. Are you working in each one of those dimensions? What is suffering? I'll give you a perfect example.
right,
Someone might say, "Oh, I'm doing great. I'm meeting all my financial
right,
goals.
right.
I'm meeting all
Yeah.
my career goals." Okay, well, what about your loved one? Have you written them a nice letter lately? Have you, shown your intentions towards them? Have you, what about the aunt that you haven't talked to because you've been too busy? Are you spending time, nurturing that relationship? Or the best friend that you've had since you were two? Are
Mhm.
you nurturing that relationship? So you go through and say, what are you doing in your own life? How about your physical health? Oh, I work out daily. Okay, but are you sitting all day? What is, and reminding that 1 to 2% change requires someone to get better,
Mhm.
without big sweeping changes. There
Mhm.
was a year that I would have said that I was doing well in everything. And then it was my husband that said, you're sitting too much. And I'm like, oh, whatever,
Right.
and I dismissed it. So then I ended up at the chiropractor and he's like, you've got peripheral.
Oh my
I'm
goodness.
peripheral. And
Oh,
and so I went and looked it up and the technical it says glucose wasting away, but your glutes are wasting away, but really basically it's your butt wasting away. Now nobody wants to hear your butt's wasting away.
right.
I should have changed immediately. If
Mhm.
you don't hear that there's change, whether it's a person that loves you or one of your employees
Mhm.
that says, wait a minute, the parts are not being as quality made or whatever it might be, and you haven't stopped and listened and say, oh, hold on, let's
Mhm.
hear what this person has to say or how that is going to change the direction of our lives if we don't do it, then what ends up happening is you don't have an empowered team or an individual. So for leaders, I would say stop and listen. If you don't stop and listen and actually disseminate the information and say, okay, this is what I'm hearing. Is that what you're telling me? And if that's not what you're telling me, having that two-way loop where the employee can say, no, what I'm telling you is part ABC component D is 1/8 of an inch off, and every nut that's going into that part is not going to work, and you're going to have a failure.
Yes.
So you have to open it up so that the fast paced business doesn't swallow you up.
Yes. And again, I listen, all of this stuff is incredibly important because if you're a regular listener to my work, you've heard me say on multiple occasions, you're either getting better, or you're getting worse every day. You're not staying the same. You have to actually make a conscious decision to get better. And I'm telling you, I'm talking to you directly. You are unqualified to do this. All right. There needs to be somebody in your life, whether it's a coach, whether it's a spouse, whether it's a family, whatever it is, somebody that you trust that's going to give you some honest feedback, just like you had shared with your husband to say, hey, you're sitting too much. Okay, that's how it can get better. So when it comes, and I know we kind of got off topic there, when it comes to your guide, like the next thing that you're going to be rolling out for your business, can you speak on that a little bit and how you were able to come up with that on your like the after you put out the first book?
Sure. So now that I kind of understand the dynamics of my team,
Yeah.
important, and fostered that, the next thing is to prioritize what's next. And that's what you're asking. It's
Mhm.
encouraging the balance of not only the personal and the professional and all the aspects. So for us, we have a model now that we know that works. Fiction novel, workbook, fiction novel, workbook. At the same time, we're still doing the coaching and the mentoring along the way. There are other people that have ideas. Lead with authenticity and then communicate and collaborate on everything you're doing.
Mhm.
I mean, everything. It could be your billing process, but you want to make those incremental changes of 1 to 2% in every area: accounting, finance, marketing. I would love to learn more about some of the technology this year that's come out. It's come out so fast. It's like the next thing you know, you're like, oh my goodness, I thought I knew the technology, and then tomorrow there's another one.
Yep.
Do more videos with AI or whatever. There's it,
That's actually a big important one too, because the technology is going to be constantly coming out. So you got to know which technology you're going to use and how you're going to use it. That's the human brain doing those things, not the
right,
technology piece. So make sure
right,
you guys understand that piece as well.
and understand where you want to be. You
Mhm.
know, who is your persona? And when I say persona, who is your market? Who give them a name? What do they look like? What's the age? What's the country? What's the, you know, the product that you're going to make a difference? For me, it is, you know, academic development, mentorship, career development. So I know, stay in that lane and grow, but also say, okay, how is that going to change in the next 10 years? So you stay with the curve. You don't want to go in a downward curve.
Yep. And the beautiful thing about the world we live in now is you can do that. You can name your avatar, you can name your client, you can name specifically the person that you would want to work with. This is why at least me personally, I believe it's such a breakthrough that you've been able to take the fiction space, and connect it with the real world, professional and personal development space, because there's so many lines that need to be kind of dotted, so many I's, so many T's that need to be crossed and I's that need to be dotted when it comes to how exactly are we going to teach professional development to kids. Right now, there's nothing, and I don't know if it's ever going to be like that, to be sound pessimistic when I say that, but I don't know if we're going to see a time where we're requiring professional development for kids over, requiring that a quadratic equation, or that certain, you memorize certain things science wise because of what is going to quote unquote get you in the school, is going to get you, the letter grade is going to get you. But we're starting to see now, seeing that we're so connected as a world, that professional development, the folks that are lacking that professional development, you're losing your businesses. You're losing them at an alarming rate. You're losing the things that you want at an alarming rate if you are not making sure you're investing in the professional development. So, you sort of already mentioned this. Can you just kind of give us a overall what you want your vision to be like? Is it to open up a new school or a new business? How exactly do you give us like kind of your 10-year or 10 to 15-year vision for your business?
You know, you brought up one that is part of my heart that I haven't actually put into some kind of plan yet, but I
But
would
that's why you're
love,
on the Move Swiftly podcast. This is what we
I
do, girl.
to open. There's a school in Indianapolis called Park Tudor, which is one of the best
Mhm.
private schools. And it used to be um have dorms where people could say that. I would love to open up a school like that
Mhm.
for underprivileged children and family that, that are on the right track, but maybe, maybe it's a single mom and they can't navigate, they're working nights and they really just need a safe environment for their kids to be, so that they can go to school and get a good education. I would love that. That would be like the most massive um accomplished to me, because that's been in my heart for years. But for me personally, where I am right now, it's to develop everybody that I can and push them to be their best.
Yeah.
And understand that their accomplishments mean something to them, and they can, and help them understand how to get there.
Yes. And if anyone's listening in, what's the best way to get in touch with you if they want to hear more and move forward?
Sure. It's I try to make it easy. It's rhondaparkertaylor.com for my website, for all my social medias, except for the ones that have like an at one or whatever at the end, like X does. And feel free to drop me a line, follow, share,
Mhm.
and make sure that you watch this video, because there's great tips regularly on it.
Yes, and all of that will be included in the show notes as well. So, Rhonda, the final thing I do to close out all the shows is I want to use your imagination a little bit. I want you to pretend that you are back to being that kindergarten girl and you just got the news that you're going to be held back a year. Pretend that that little girl has come into the Zoom room and obviously she feels a little distraught that she's going to have to go to kindergarten again. Can you just give her some words of encouragement and we will officially close?
Sure. To all of you that have an experience similar to that, whether it's past or present, don't let experiences in life dim your light. Because even though it might be a situation that seems very big and traumatic and scary at whatever level you're at, it will mean nothing in 3 days, a year, 2 years, 3 years, because it's the things that you do with that information that makes a difference.
And I could not have said it better myself. You actually took me back to when we would lose in high school when we'd lose a football game, and our coach would just say, "Hey, man, the sun is going to rise in the morning. Just believe me." So appreciate the work you're doing. I'm so looking forward to staying in touch with you and keeping up with your journey. So everyone out there, fellow teammates, continue to move swiftly. We will talk more soon.